The claim I will be refuting goes as follows. If women under the age of 50 stop getting mammograms, the mortality rate from breast cancer will increase. My opponent also made 3 secondary claims, which I will be highlighting the flaws in them shortly. My opponent was basically arguing that the federal government wants to stop allowing women under 50 to get mammograms to see if they have breast cancer. First of all, throughout the argument, she clearly miscommunicates to the audience, saying that the women would be prohibited from getting mammograms, which is not true. Women under 50 will still be able to get mammograms, no matter what recommendations they put. In response to her first secondary claim, which she says that women under the age of 50 will have less of a chance of surviving breast cancer if they happen to develop it, I'd like to say that this is a circular reasoning for the fact that she merely is restating her main claim. She says that if women under 50 don't get tested for breast cancer, more will develop and die from it. And I think everyone would agree on that because it's true. And if you don't get screened, then the woman won't know she has breast cancer. But on one of the websites she herself cites, the Washington Post, they mentioned the whole reasoning and logic behind this decision of raising the age from 40 to 50. It's about a study conducted, or more like a model, that sort of proves there is somewhat of a benefit of screening at a later age. It's a study done by the National Cancer Institute that shows that out of 1,000 women that started screening at the age of 40, only 0.7 deaths would be prevented. That out of those 1,000, 470 would receive false positives, and about 33 would even undergo unnecessary biopsies. The consequences of all these false positives is that it would just bring anxiety and stress for these women under 50 because they think they have breast cancer, when in reality they are fine. And so, in result, the federal government believes that there is more benefit if women begin their testing at the age of 50. And my opponent failed to mention this study. In response to her second secondary claim, which states that women that don't know that they're at a higher risk for developing breast cancer will have less of a chance of surviving breast cancer if they happen to develop it, I'd like to say that most of the time she spent speaking about the likelihood that a woman would have breast cancer based on family members. She gave facts about how likely women have a chance of getting breast cancer, and I think that this does not really further her argument, but it merely provides more background information. Also, she herself stated that if women know that they're at a higher risk, like the women who have family members with breast cancer, they can get screening without a problem from the government, even if they are under 50. She also states here that women under 50 are at higher risk wouldn't be able to get a mammogram, and this is false because any woman under 50 can still get a mammogram if she wants to. There is no restrictions being placed. In response to her third secondary claim, which she says that women of all ages might get scared and stop getting mammograms altogether, I'd like to say that most of her information is her own opinion. The quote she uses from Judith A. Lace, who treats breast cancer patients at San Francisco General Hospital, states that people will end up not getting mammograms, they'll just kiss them off. I'm concerned that the urgency to get them done will fade. I think this quote doesn't strengthen her argument because my opponent says that women would be too scared and worried about getting screening, and the quote says the opposite, that the woman's urgency to get it done will fade. I believe we can call the person she quoted an expert since she deals with cancer patients. Therefore, I can conclude my opponent's differing view as a hasty generalization, which means making a conclusion with insufficient grounds, since she doesn't provide concrete evidence of what she claims. In this last secondary claim. In conclusion, I'd like to say that I have stated good evidence to support the contrary argument, and I was able to highlight the flaws in my opponent's reasoning. Thank you.
All right, the main claims labeled, as you get to the secondary points, you're doing an okay job on that. You do make this argument that says that she seems to be making a presupposition that people would be prohibited from getting mammograms, and it's really just a government recommendation about when the age should be, but there's no prohibition against it. I think that's a good point. It would be nice if you had some evidence that demonstrated it. I don't think there's any restriction imposed by any insurance company, and there's no information from the advocate that people who get medical care as a result of government assistance would be prohibited from doing this. But if you had some affirmative evidence on your side, that would make that argument so much more compelling. The challenge on circular reasoning on that first point's okay, but basically what you do is you give us a good context based on what the data is from the NCI and try and explain why they've made this particular recommendation. I think one of the things that you can do there is kind of compare the significance of the false positives and the biopsies that people get compared to any potential savings that are going to happen, and make that the significance of the point. You know, when we're looking at these two things, we're talking about balancing resources, putting stress on people, potentially subjecting them to medical procedures that they don't need to have, and then even talking about what the risk factors of medical procedures like that might be. I think that would advance that argument a little bit more. Transition to the second point is really clear. I like the idea of the family history issues coming up. Let's face it, if family history is a contributory factor to breast cancer and women are aware of it, then the mammogram becomes justified at whatever age is necessary. The mammograms do not tell women about their family history, and so that's not really the source of any benefit that occurs there, and I think you've got a good argument on that point. On the last point, you've got this general challenge on the evidence that comes there. You kind of say it's a hasty generalization, but the only, basically it's the authority of the advocate that we're using here. It's very speculative. I think you've got a reasonable challenge on that. One of the things that I think you might notice, again, based on doing some additional research, is that just because the government recommends it doesn't necessarily mean that any healthcare providers are going to change their standards or policies. And I think there's been some evidence on that that I remember hearing about, that in fact the healthcare providers are not planning on changing anything based on this recommendation. And I think that would have been a good argument to make at that point too.